Like,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Rudolph, and I am the Baltimore Regional Director with Maryland Capital Enterprises. And today we're going to be talking about developing business plans and cash flow projections, really with the eye of getting a loan to either start or expand your business. So before we get started, a little bit about us. We are a CDFI, a community development financial institution, which a lot of people think of as a nonprofit bank, but we also offer, in addition to our loans, services such as one-on-one counseling, webinars like this one, in-person classroom sessions, and those are all free to everybody, whether or not you apply for us. And then we also have a women's business conference each March where there is a small fee. And we do that because we are an SBA designated women's business center. So in addition to all of our other services, we've got enhanced services for women-owned businesses. We started back in 1998, just on the Lower Eastern Shore, expanded, developed a relationship with the SBA, and started serving as an intermediary lender for the entire Eastern Shore. In 2012, we crossed the bridge to the Western Shore, and now we're serving Hartford, Cecil, Baltimore, and Anne Arundel counties, along with Baltimore City. You can find out much more about what we do at marylandcapital.org or Women's Business Center at marylandcapitalenterprises.org. So, what do we do about the money? So we are a micro lender and we're an SBA intermediary lender, but that does not mean that we lend SBA funds. What it means is that we do SBA backed loans. So we get our funding from other federal agencies, from state agencies, from private institutions, and from foundations. And that's what we lend out. And the SBA will back a portion of those loans, which allows us to give loans to folks who might not be bankable. Again, we also provide all that counseling and training whether or not you're applying for a loan. But now let's get into the main part, the business plans and the cash flows. So before we really get into that, I've got this blueprint here for a reason. And the reason is as you're starting your business, you really want to think about your business as a building. Right. So if you go down to downtown Baltimore or downtown New York, you will see a fence with a sign on it over a blank lot that's got a picture of a beautiful mixed use building that's going to go in. And oftentimes for 12, 18, 24 months, it's just sitting there and it looks like nothing's going on. But really what's going on is that they are all, looking over the studies. They're figuring out, what's underneath the building, what they're going to have to deal with. They're building the foundation for that building. Then once that construction starts, it goes up pretty quickly. It fills up pretty quickly. So think about that as your business. The more time you spend studying and building that foundation, the quicker and more easily your business is going to pop up and then grow. And a good way to do that is with a thorough business plan. So, we're going to talk a little bit about writing a business plan and specifically what a business plan is and who needs it. So, the truth is, anybody who's looking to start or grow their small business needs a business plan. And it's a document that needs to be updated throughout the life of the business, especially if you're going to be doing things like expanding, opening up second stores, anything like that. But also, it's needed if you want to get any loans or the rare occasional grants that are available. This is going to be what's in the room describing what your business is for the decision maker. So you want to make sure that it's thorough and that folks really understand not only who you are, but what you do, your place in the market, and what you're asking of them. So it is that blueprint from your business, and it's going to be a large document, but not super large. Lots of folks think that they need to write a 10, 20, 100-page business plan. But the truth is, the folks reading them, especially when looking for a loan, don't really want to be reading 100 pages. So if you can get it in, 3 to 7 pages, not including, graphs and photographs, then you're probably going to be pretty good. But you do want to consider your audience for your business plan. So if you're writing for a grant, you might want to move things up that talks about what you're doing in the community. So things like hiring from the community, possibly hiring ex-offenders, anything like that that you're doing to build that community, because that's what the foundations tend to care about. If you're looking for a loan from a bank, you still want to keep that in, but what you want to, do up front is talk about how you're going to be able to pay back that loan. You want to convince them that your business is going to be successful enough that you're going to be able to pay them back and then possibly get a bigger loan as you expand in the future. So, what are we looking for in a business plan as decision makers for loans? The first thing is, What drew you to this business, right? So, why are you doing this? Is it something that you learned from your childhood? You saw that, family members in assisted living facilities were not being taken care of as well as you wanted, and this is something you think you can do a better job of. And then what's going to drive you to continue? Starting a business is going to be very hard. Oftentimes some passion tends to slip away. So what's going to keep you driving? Number two, expertise in the field. We're going to want to know that you have enough expertise to run your business. And if you don't, how are you going to get that education or mentorship? Now, specifically, if you're in a business that requires certifications or specific training, we're going to want to see proof that you have all of those as well. So, again, a salon setting, contractor settings, things like that. We also want to make sure that you are doing our research. And what that means is we understand our place in the market. So that means not only, is there our industry growing, but is it growing where we are? Is there enough room in the market for my business to succeed where it is doing exactly what I want it to do? It's also going to help you develop contingency plans. So not only just in case you get injured and you can't work for 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months, but also if you need to shift and pivot, if you've got ideas of what you may be doing in the future, it'll make it easier to shift and pivot, and we like to see that. And one thing a lot of folks forget to put in their business plan is that ask. You really want to let them know what they're expecting from the reader. So is that you're looking to convince them to get a grant, you're looking to convince them to give you a loan, or you're looking to convince somebody to invest in your business? So we're going to talk about the four parts of a business plan. We break them up into these four parts. I have a template that I'm happy to email to anybody here that breaks it up in these four parts. But the truth is, you all know how to talk about your business better than I do. So if you find that you have a better way of telling your story, go for it. But just as long as it's containing most or all of this information in a way that's easy to understand, except the executive summary beginning, the first few sentences. This is where you really want to set up that reader with the ask that I was talking about on that last slide. So we're going to be doing our cash flows for Nick's Dill Pickles in just a little bit. So we'll just use that as our example business. It's a fake business. It doesn't exist. But the opening of my business plan when I'm seeking a loan might say, Nick's Dill Pickles LLC is a wholesaling pickle operation out of Baltimore, Maryland, owned by Nick Rudolph. We are seeking a loan of $15,000 to purchase our initial pickling equipment, inventory, and other working capital. If that's my first couple of sentences, the reader is then going to know exactly what I'm looking for, and therefore they're going to know what they're going to be looking for from me in order to answer yes or no, are they going to get that loan? So once you have that, you then want to talk about your passion, what you drew you to the business, and then a very brief description of what you do. And if you could put it in there, what is your special sauce? What do you have that your competitors don't? And no matter who you are, no matter how unique your business is, you do have competitors to some degree. So you want to show that you understand where you are in the market. And then you want to, especially if you're buying different types of equipment, make a more detailed ask. So, we're going to buy these pieces of pickling equipment that's going to allow us to pickle, this many jars per month, which will allow us to hit our targets, things like that. Then we have our marketing plan. This is the longest part of a business plan because it's not just about how you're going to advertise. First thing you're going to want to do is talk about your market research. So do your Googling, look at your industry publication, talk to other people in the industry, go to your library business center, do whatever you can to get as much information as you can so that you can find quotes that shows that there's room in the market for you globally and locally. The more detail you can put in that, the more you're going to convince folks that you are going to be able to make money in the first place. Then you want to talk about who your primary customer is. And many of us have businesses that can serve absolutely everybody. But we really want to drill down on the folks that if we're getting them in the door, if we're getting them to use our services, we're going to be okay. And everything else is just more money coming in. So if you're opening up a salon in downtown Baltimore, you might look at the demographics and say, okay, well, we can serve everybody. But if I'm getting, a good steady flow of African American women who are 35 to 65 who make $85,000 a year or more, then I'm probably going to do okay. And so therefore, we're going to target our marketing to those folks. Then with the competition, you want to list at least three. You want to discuss what they do well, and then mention how you're going to survive or thrive in the ecosystem with them. Is it your special sauce? Are you in an industry where there's a lot of collaboration? It can be very different depending on what your industry is. You also, when you're thinking about competition, want to think holistically. I have an example of a comic book store. Their three competitors that they put were two local places within a half hour that served, a similar market and sold similar things, and then Amazon. Because what they were showing us is that they understand that folks can get their products in other places without even leaving their house, and coming to them is going to be for the customer service and for the expertise. Then you want to talk about your pricing strategy. So, are you going to be high end? Are you going to be middle of the road? Or are you going to be a value proposition? You make that decision based on who your primary customer is and then the economic demographics of the area that you're in. Finally, you want to talk about your advertising. And that doesn't necessarily just mean traditional things like print, radio and television. It also doesn't just mean social media. But if you are going to be doing any of those campaigns, we need more detail than just saying you're going to do a social media campaign. Identify the platforms you're going to use and what type of things you're going to be putting on those platforms with what regularity. You also may be in a business that doesn't do that traditional advertising. You might need to be doing your marketing by going to doctors' offices, by going to chamber meetings, by going to conferences and setting up booths so you can get larger projects. All of that is part of your marketing, and all of those are eligible expenses, for a small business loan. So when you're thinking about marketing, you really want to think about it much more than just how am I going to advertise that business. Before I go on to operations and organizations, because this is about the halfway point on the business plan, are there any questions about the executive summary or the marketing section? Okay, we're going to go right into the organization operations. Now, as I said, the last section was the longest section. This section will probably be shorter than you think it would be, because here we're just giving some basic information about the business. So first, you're going to mention the legal structure of the business. Are you an LLC? Are you a corporation? You want to mention, are you going to be a home-based business, a brick and mortar business? Are you going to be based online, or are you going to be doing a lot of talking to your clients on the phone? You also want to discuss your hours. So if you're a storefront, are you 7 days a week, 9 to 5, or do you have evening hours and why? If you're home-based or online, what are going to be your customer service hours? If somebody needs to talk to somebody about your services or your products, when are you going to be available for on the phone or via chat? You also want to think about your employees. First, do you even need employees? Is your business something, are you a consultant where you can run it on your own? Or, are you a construction company that's going to be hiring contractors for each of your projects? Or are you a storefront that's going to need to hire W-2 employees? So figure that out and then list out what that management structure is going to look like. Are you going to be actually running the business, or are you going to be hiring somebody to do that? If they are contractors, you want to talk about, making sure that you're doing everything right. Same if they're employees, that, you're budgeting for all of the different taxes and insurances you need when you have those employees. And then insurance. Every small business needs insurance. And what I would recommend doing if you haven't already done it is talk to insurance agents, talk to a couple of them. Talk to them about your business and ask them what type of coverages you would need and how much that's going to cost. Compare and see who you feel most comfortable working with and go with them. For many basic businesses, we might be talking $600 to $1,000 a year. But if you start putting in, working with kids, working with the elderly, food products, transportation, working with animals, those numbers can go up. So you want to make sure that you're budgeting appropriately for that insurance. Then you want to think about your growth. Are you happy to be a one-person shop until you retire? Or are you looking to, maybe start that new store that you're going to be franchising out to people? So you want to talk about if you're going to expand and what your plan is to expand. What is your timeline? Also, are you maybe a serial entrepreneur? You see a problem, you're going to open up a business to solve it. You think it'll be solved in 5 years. You're going to close the business and start another business. All of those are perfectly valid. Just make sure you're explaining what your growth plan is. Same thing with your exit strategy. Are you planning to work this business until you retire and then hand it off to family or friends? Are you growing a business just to sell it so that you can grow another business? Or like I said before, did you identify a problem and you're just going to have the business long enough to solve that problem? Again, with the contingency plans, this is, thinking about what happens if you are unable to work for 3 months. How is your business going to succeed? Do you have other people trained up? Will you have employees who will be able to step in? Do you maybe have other businesses that you can shuttle your customers to for a small amount of time? So, really, what is that? And with COVID-19, really what that means is folks are more concerned about just illness in general. So if you find out that, one of your employees or customers has got something that's serious, how are you going to let folks know? That just needs to be a sentence or two. The final section is your financial plan, and that's going to look very different depending on whether you're a startup or you're an existing business. So for startups, what you're going to be doing here is putting in your startup costs. List down everything you're going to buy and what it's going to cost, and if you can, add quotes as an addendum. Then you want to talk about your break even point. So you want to show that you understand how many sales you need to do a week or a month in order to pay all your bills, pay your employees, and pay yourself. We're then going to require 24 to 36 months of cash flow projections, which we'll be going over next. And then you want to talk about your credit, especially if there is an issue with your credit. So if you know that you had a bankruptcy 6 years ago, or you know that 3 years ago your parents got ill, you had to go travel to take care of them for 6 months and you got behind on your bills, but you're doing better now, mention that here. The reason why is if we know it's coming, we can mitigate against it. But if you tell us you've got great credit and we pull your credit report and it's got a whole bunch of these missed payments, that's a surprise, and a surprise is something that lenders hate almost more than anything. So if they're not prepared for it, it can easily just become a no. Whereas if they are prepared for it, they'll be working to turn it into a yes. So it's very difficult to talk about credit problems. I know it, we all know it, but the truth is that everybody's missed a payment. Everybody's had some issue in the past. So, if we're the more comfortable we are talking about it, the easier it's going to be to mitigate those problems and work to get those scores back up. Oh, sorry, went too far. So for existing businesses, instead of startup costs, you're going to be putting the cost of whatever your expansion is. But you're also going to want to show your business history. So you want to bring, a chart of maybe your last 2 years profit and loss. If you've got a quarterly balance sheet, adding that as an addendum is something you're definitely going to want to know. And then also discuss any current loans you have. So if you currently have a startup loan that you're still paying on, you want to let the lender know about that. Because again, we don't like surprises. So if you tell us about it, we know it's happening. It's something we can plan for. So I'm going to go to cash flow projections next, but I just want to see before I go into that, if there are any final questions about the business plan. All righty. So what are cash flow projections and why do we need them? So they're basically going to show you how much money you think is going to come in and go out of your business so you can understand if you're going to be making a profit. If you're bringing in $5 million a month, but it's costing you $6 million a month to do your services, even though you're bringing in 60 million a year, or was that right? Whatever, 60 million a year, you're not profitable. So we look at a cash flow. This is the one that we're going to be working on the right-hand screen. But if you have a document that you're more comfortable with, of course, that's absolutely okay as long as it is broken out monthly and contains this information. The good thing to know about this document is that it's a living document. Not only will it not be 100% accurate, but the majority of the cells are not going to be accurate. So when you're putting everything together, what you want to do is make sure you're showing a snapshot of how you think you'll be doing, sort of in a worst case scenario. So you don't want to be too bullish. And what that means is if you think you're going to make $20 million selling t-shirts in year one, and you know it, and you put it on there, it's going to scare our loan committees because they're going to say, this person thinks that they're going to turn a $35,000 loan into $2 million in 12 months. That's almost impossible. But if you can show us that, in a worst case scenario, you're going to be able to make enough money to pay all your bills, pay us, and pay yourself, then if you make more than that, that's just gravy. It's just butter. It's just more money for you. But we know that, you've planned for a worst case and you'll be okay there. Another way to ensure that it's useful is to include as many income streams and expenses as possible. The more you break it up, the better it's going to be a document to figure out if you're meeting your projections and if you need to make changes. So, for instance, if you have a restaurant, you might break it up, dine in and carry out, but you also might say, look, we have a bar, so I think we'll do 70% food and 30% liquor. Then 6 months later, you can look at your books and maybe you're doing 60% food and 40% liquor. Then you can sort of ask yourself a couple of questions. The first one is the issue that we have a weak food program that needs to be improved, or is our bar program so strong that maybe we should be investing any resources into making it stronger because that seems to be what folks are coming in for? The more detail you have in this document, the better decisions you're going to be able to make. You also want to make sure that if you're a business that's sales change month to month, that you are showing that in your monthly cash flows. So if you are a landscaper, we're going to want to see that, your March, April, May is busier than your December, unless you've got a very specific job where you're more busy in the winter time. And then, of course, are you paying yourself? We want to make sure that you're able to live a lifestyle, have a house, have transportation, clothe yourself, feed yourself, and have a little left over for fun. So, why do we need to do this? Well, number one, if you're looking for a loan, you have to do it. Number two, it's that planning tool. It's going to let you figure out how much money you need to borrow to start your business. The last thing you want to do is take out a $50,000 loan if you only need 10,000 because you're paying interest on money that you don't need. It's going to show you the difference between, the profit and the money coming in. It's just that good governance. And most importantly, it's going to show you when you're going to be able to take money out for yourself. So, what are you going to need? The truth is, if you're working with a counselor like one with MCE, not too much. We'll work with you to figure out what some of these numbers are going to be. But what you do need is a template. You need to know how much money you have in the bank specifically for the business. You want to know all your income and expense streams. You want to figure out what you think your payroll is going to be. You want to include your loan as income and your loan payments as expenses. Many people forget to do that. And percent markup really means what is your inventory going to cost? If you sell a jar of pickles for $10, what is the material cost of that jar of pickles? So I am going to pull up our template. We're going to fill one out with everybody for my fake business. While I'm doing that, it's good to know that these numbers are not real. I know nothing about the pickling business. These are just example numbers. So this is going to be your spreadsheet. The way ours is set up, if you change a month, it's going to just change it for the whole year for you. If you are a business that isn't seasonal, instead of thinking of it as, July through or June through May as it is here, think of it just as months 1 through 12. So we're going to put our business name in so we don't forget who we are. All right. And then we're going to start asking ourselves a few questions based on the information that we already have. So first, do we have any cash on hand to start this business? The truth is almost nobody has any cash on hand to start their business. So we're going to leave that as zero. Then we're going to think about our income streams. So I'm going to sell at farmers markets. I'm going to sell wholesale to restaurants, hopefully. And we'll do some online sales. We'll go ahead and leave these last two blank. Eventually I may be doing something like merch if I get popular enough, but that's a few years down the line. And then our loan is our last bit of income. And we always want to have the loan as the last bit of income. And you'll see why when we go to the expenses, it has to do with your inventory costs. So we're just going to use the example that I said earlier and assume a $15,000 loan. So now let's start thinking about how much money we're going to make. So let's say I get that loan in June as it's shown here. I get the actual check in June. I get into my rental pickling facility. I start the pickling, and I can probably start my sales in July at farmers markets. So I'm going to be in Baltimore City and I'm going to do the Waverly Farmers Market on Saturdays. That's year round. And then the 83 Underpass Farmers Market on Sundays, which is May through Christmas. So right now, July, that's probably one of the busiest months at both of the markets. So I'm going to want to make sure I've got a lot of inventory because I'm probably going to hit the ground running there. Assuming let's just say 4 weekends at each of those, just making up a number out of thin air. Let's say we make $2,500 there. Wholesale, I'm just starting. I don't have time to talk to restaurants yet, so we're not going to have any. Online, we're going to have about $500 because friends and family are going to buy pickles from us. August, folks have started to hear about us. People have started to taste our pickles, give them to friends. More people want to, enjoy our products. So we're going to go up to 3,500. And one restaurant heard enough that they're going to do that as well. And we'll probably keep, $500 a month sort of in perpetuity for online sales. September, the weather's beautiful. Both farmers markets are open. People are starting to think about the fall. Everything is looking great. We're going to see a pretty big increase there. And then we're going to add another restaurant at 250 a month. October, same thing. Folks are starting to hear a little bit more about us. We'll add another $1,500 there, another 250 there. November and December, people are thinking about holiday presents. So we might see a bigger jump in those 2 months. Um, Especially because that's also the end of the farmers market season in Baltimore. And then, of course, adding one restaurant a month. Then we're going to go to January, where we're only in Waverly, which is the smaller farmers market, and the weather's not great. So we are probably not going to do too well, but we'll have time to go out and sell to more restaurants. So we'll probably go up to, an extra $500 that month. Same thing with February, maybe a little bit more, but we'll also be able to focus on getting into more restaurants. March, we are still just the one farmers market, but the weather's starting to get nicer. We're probably going to see a bigger jump. So we're just going to add one restaurant that month. April, still one farmers market, but now it's absolutely beautiful out. So we're going to start doing more sales. So, we might jump that up to 5,000 just at Waverly, and we're going to add one more restaurant. May, all the people, all the farmers markets are open. The people who usually go to 83 are excited to see us. We're going to see a big old jump, and we'll probably add one more restaurant. So here we have our income for year one. It's a total of 95,000, including the loan. So you always want to, make sure that you understand that. So the income that you're generating outside of the loan is 80,000 plus the 15 for the loan. Then we're going to start talking about inventory costs. So I am going to assume here that that the sales are going to be, the cost is going to be about 30% of the sales. And I'm going to have it look at 13 through 17 in the columns because that's going to be all of our possible income, even though many of them are blank right now. So that's not going to change there, but I'll go ahead and add them here. And we'll see we've got 30% income there. Now, wages. Honestly, this type of business in a real world would be run by friends and family, but we want to show some income. So, even if we were to have employees in the real world, it would most likely be contractors. But in this world, we are going to have some W-2 employees. So month one, I'm by myself. There's not a lot going on. I may have some friends and family, but then starting in month two, I'm going to need to start paying people $15 an hour to help me out. So, maybe 750 a month during the time when both are open, um, back down to zero for the really, really um, bad months, then maybe 500 a month, and then we're going to go back up. We'll, maybe give them a bit of a raise and go up to 900. Now you see these numbers under payroll expenses. That's 10% of your wages. That's what we assume your payroll expenses are going to be. If you have real numbers, of course, put those in there. So then we're going to start thinking about our other expenses that we might have. I am going to rent a ghost kitchen in Baltimore City. They're going to take care of all of the utilities, all of the trash, so I'm not going to have a lot of that. And that's going to cost me $600 a month in rent. So we know that, and we'll put that there. So we know we're not going to have these outside services. Office supplies. I do want to get a computer and a printer, and I want to make sure I've got paper and ink, and some packaging and things like that to start off. So let's say $1,500 to start. I don't have any subscriptions or dues. I'm not going to need storage. Advertising. I am just a small business. This is going to be sort of just pickling in the evenings and selling on the weekends in addition to my full-time job. So, we might start out advertising, 250 for the first month, 200, go down $50 a month until we're at $50 a month for social media, in hopes, with the hope that we have enough word of mouth advertising to keep us going. Gas and fuel is going to be pretty minimal because I live near these markets. I can fit everything in my truck. I'm just going to not use that as a business expense. Accounting and legal. I, of course, am not going to hire an accountant or a lawyer, but you better believe I'm going to save $50 a month in a reserve. So in case I need to hire those folks, I've got the money to do that for at least for a couple of hours. We've got the rent. I am going to add a line to my telephone, so that it's separate from my phone number. That might be another $40 a month. Like I said, we don't have utilities. There's going to be some insurance that's going to be a little higher than that $1,000 number. So, let's say maybe 175 a month. As, as far as taxes and licenses go, there's a $300 state fee for all small businesses each year. And then with Baltimore City, with the different health code things I'm going to need, let's assume that I'm going to need $600 for the first year. So those are sort of my more variable expenses. Now I'm going to put in what my more stable expenses are. So first off, my MCE loan payment, $15,000 loan is 3 years. Again, this is a number I'm making up. It is not a real number, but let's say 350 a month. Alrighty. Other debts. This is a brand new business. I don't have any other loans, but if I did, I would put them here. My startup costs. So this is where I'm going to buy my equipment, my big expensive things. Of that 15,000, 10,000 is buying that equipment. And then in year one, I'm not taking an owner's draw because I have got that full-time job. So what I'm showing here is that after my expenses, paying out a lot of money in the first month, and then sort of money that's based on my sales moving forward. At the end of the year, I'm going to have $40,795 in the bank for the business. So for year two, I'm just going to copy all of year one. I'm going to go to the year two cash flow. And then I'm just going to make some changes. So the first thing I'm going to change is the year. And then I'm going to look at my sales. So this is my best month from the year before. So I'm just going to put this here to just as a marker, but I think I am still going to improve. I'll do 10,000. But I think I'll stick it at that 3,000 number for the restaurants. July, I'll probably improve a little bit more. Um, August, I think I'll reach my capacity of 15,000 a month. Um, so we're going to go ahead and put our restaurants in here. We're going to do the $15,000 a month through December. We're going to cut really much lower for those closed months, and then pop back up to 12,500 when both open again. I do not need a second loan, so I'm going to take that income out. That's something folks forget to do a lot of the time. That formula didn't copy to there, so we're just going to somehow it's doing the next one. Let's see. All right, though I did need to copy this across. Which is going to change our number down at the bottom. So that's 37,195. So you start off at 37,195 because if you don't put that in there, it's going to look like you've got negative numbers to start off the year. So now this is a more realistic of where we're going, but let's look at our expenses. So our inventory expenses aren't going to change, but I think that our hiring expenses are going to change significantly. I'm going to go up to $1,500 a month during during the two season, and then 750 a month during the one season. Let's see. I'm not going to need as many office supplies, but I'm going to probably need to, re-up a little at the beginning and then maybe just, I'm doing a little more. So I'm going to save $50 a month specifically for that as well. Advertising, I'm making more money, so I'll advertise a little more. We'll do maybe $100 a month in advertising. We are going to make our loan payments in these first 2 months because we definitely want to do that. We are not going to need to buy new equipment yet, but things always break. So in the middle of the year, I'm going to put $5,000 into an escrow account, so that when something breaks, I've got the money to fix it. Now my business is doing really well. I think I deserve to be paid from it. So I'm going to take out $2,500 a month, $30,000 a year. That might be the kids' college fund. That might be, a new car. It might be a fancy vacation. Who knows what that is? But I think at this point, 2 years in, I deserve to take some money out. And at the end of year two, as you can see in this cell, I've got $91,000 left for my business. And that's the year when I think, all right, do I want to take this full time? So now I've got this document saying, like, this is exactly what I think will happen. As I open and I grow, I can check and see if I'm meeting these numbers. If I'm not, I'll need to adjust them and see if I'll still be okay. If not, again, then I'll need to make some changes. If I'm doing better, then that's great, but I want to capture that so I can have an idea of how much money I'm making so I can make decisions about the growth of the business. I will be able to email you this completed and a blank version of these cash flows. Um, so before I take this off, are there any questions? Um, okay, so we got a question about the formula here. So the formula will be in the spreadsheets I send you. The only thing you would need to change is this number at the end. But what this formula is showing is that you're taking that C13 through C17 are these highlighted cells. So you're taking the total amount in these cells, and that's what the semicolon is for. That's showing that it's all of those. And then because we're having a 30% inventory cost, we're going to multiply that by 0.3. So if it were a 25% inventory cost, we would do 0.25, copy from that first one, and paste, and you'll see that that is a little bit lower, but we'll go back. for those. So Carly, did that answer your question? And you can feel free to unmute yourself if you like.
Hi, Nick. Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Good to see you.
You too.
Um,
Great class.
thank you. Awesome. All right. Any other questions before I go to the end of the presentation? Nope. All right. So here comes the end of the presentation. So before we go into, and I'm going to just do after this part the access to capital part very quickly because next week we're going to be doing a whole hour on it. But before we do that, some important things to remember. First of all, like I almost forgot to do, you need to pull that year end up to the beginning of the next year so that you're not starting at zero again. You want to be careful about taking too much or too little of an owner's draw. If after 2 years I had $121,000 in the bank for my business and I'd not paid myself, a banker might question that. But if I had $121,000 in the business and then I took 100,000 out, the banker may question, why I took so much out. You want to think about your accountants, legal, and marketing as investments in your business, not as expenses. So you really want to make sure that you've got enough money there. You want to be careful about negative cash flow. That didn't happen with this business, but oftentimes as you're starting, you are going to have negative cash flow for a few months, and that's okay. But if you know after 6, 12, 18 months, you're still in negatives, something is going to need to be adjusted. Again, having the loan as income and the loan payments as expenses, and then keeping those expectations realistic. So now we're going to talk a little bit about funding. Again, we're going to go into much more detail next week about those, but basically to apply to us, there's 3 forms that need to be filled out online. The first is our client intake. The second is the business loan application. And the third is a personal information supplement that will need to be filled out by anybody who owns 20% or more of the business. We're also going to need supporting documents. If you are a startup, we're going to need your business plan and cash flow projections, which of course we're happy to help you develop. Documentation that you've been turned down for a previous loan. That does not mean that you need to have gone through a whole process. If you go to your business banker at your local bank and they say, we don't do startups and you're a startup, that is enough. Just as long as you can get them to send you an email or something that says that. Then we will need 2 years of personal tax returns and 3 months, actually, this is a new one, 3 months of personal bank statements. If your business has been around 2 years or more, we're going to want to see 2 years of federal tax returns. If it's been around for 1 year, we'll just want to see one. And then we'll also want to see 3 months of business bank statements. Everything else is just optional, but we really like to see it. Things like reference letters, resumes, leases, contracts, licenses, things like that. So what are we looking for? We're looking that you've got a clear understanding of what your business is and what it takes to be successful, what your experience in the field is, how realistic and strong your cash flows are, the strength of your collateral. We do require collateral for most of our loans. Of course, wholly owned real estate is the best, but we can get very, very flexible. Reasonable credit. You'll notice here that there's not a number, and that's because we don't have a number. What we're looking for is what you've done in the last 12 to 24 months, paying particular attention to missed payments and past due amounts. There are, however, 2 disqualifiers. The first is a bankruptcy discharge in the last 24 months or less, and the second is a tax debt without a payment plan. If you have a tax debt, we can work with you to apply as you're getting that payment plan set up, but we just can't close a loan until you have that payment plan with the IRS or with the state. We're looking at the general economic conditions of the venture. That means is it the right time to open up this business in this place? And then if the business is not successful, can you get back into the workforce? Our normal loans go up to $35,000 for new business and up to 150, pardon me, if you've been around for 2 years or more. The terms are going to depend on the size of the loan. 35,000 might be 5 years. Anything 100 or more is definitely going to be 10. Our interest rates are 6 to 12%, but generally these are going out in the 8 or 9% range. As I said, the collateral is required. Anybody with 20% or more will need to personally guarantee the loan. The application fee is $100 plus the credit report fee for each owner. We do a TransUnion pool and we do a soft pool. We will also give you a full copy of your credit report and explain it to you. There are closing costs involved. Generally, a $50,000 loan will walk out the door with 48 to 50-ish. We take your money out of your payments out automatically from your business checking account. It will either be the first or the 15th of the month. You can make that decision for however it works better for your business. We don't have prepayment penalties, so if your loan is 30 days old, you can just pay it off. Also, if you know you can't make a payment, let us know a week ahead of time and we'll figure something out so that we're not reporting anything bad to the credit bureaus. We'll visit you twice a year, talk about how your business is doing, and let you know about resources. And then, as far as who can apply and what you can apply for, almost any small business in our service area, unless you're one of those traditional sin industries, adult bookstores, things like that, we are able to work with cannabis, however. Um, as far as uses, any business related expense, build out, rent, mortgage if you're buying the property for your building, salaries, any type of working capital. However, if you are a home-based business, we cannot pay your rent, mortgage, or utilities. And if you are a property investment business, we cannot purchase or rehab properties, but our money can do things like rehab your office, pay for your truck, pay for big electrical equipment, and things like that. The next loan is our smaller credit builder loan. This is for folks who are trying to develop credit or maybe just dipping their toes into entrepreneurship. It goes up to $5,000. It has a 9% interest rate. Collateral is not required, and the costs associated with it are much, much lower. So I say this at the end of all of my presentations, but 5 things to remember when you're applying for business capital. Number one, keep your job. You want to show that you've got income coming in. Number two, you really need some sort of accountant or at least accounting software. There are so many deadlines, at least quarterly that you're going to need to make. If you miss them, you're not in good standing, and that makes you ineligible for a lot of services and possibly getting some fines. You definitely don't want that. Ask for help. You're already doing it. There's nowhere better in the entire country for free small business services than Maryland. Talk to all of us, ask us all the same questions, and work with the folks that you feel comfortable with. When you're applying for business capital, you don't want to be making big purchases in your private life. So, unless you need to, you don't want to be buying a house or a car or opening up credit cards as you're applying for business capital. And then no business is an island. That means folks go to your small business because they like supporting small businesses that are part of their community. So be part of your community. Give to local charities, sponsor sports team, join your chamber of commerce. If you're in a Main Street, become active in that. Just show folks that you're part of the community. As far as resources, there are tons of them. We're here to help. Almost all of the libraries have small business centers. Every county's got a local economic development corporation that's part of the county. We've got your chambers. We've got great things from the SBA, like the Small Business Development Center and the Senior Corps of Retired Executives. And then your universities. Even if you didn't go there, talk to these folks, figure out, what their classes need as far as internships or maybe class projects. They may even have small business centers that's there to help local businesses. And then, of course, the business organizations like your Main Streets and downtown partnerships. We've got a whole bunch of webinars coming up tomorrow. We've got the resources for veteran-owned small businesses. We've got a marketing webinar during the day on the 20th, and then my Let's Stop Funding during the evening, and so many more. If you go to our tab under marylandcapital.org and education, you'll see what those are. These are all free to register for, and if you can't make it, these will all be available on YouTube so you can watch them and get the slides, and usually the contact information for the presenter will be there. And with that, I'll leave my contact information up and see if we have any questions. Any questions? All right, well, I think of my best questions after these things end. So you all have my contact information, nrudolph@marylandcapital.org. You can also email info@marylandcapital.org and get in touch with a business counselor. And with that, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody next week. So we got one thing in the chat. Yep, thank you all very much for your kind words. And we're looking forward to talking to you about Let's Talk Funding next week, and then more new webinars in the months to come. Have a great evening.